In a world filled with sharks, bears, and killer bees, one man is brave enough to stay indoors to bring you the latest in gaming, movie, and pop culture news. That man is Tom Awesome, and this is the Outside is Overrated podcast.
Hello and welcome to Outside is Overrated Game Club. Today we're wrapping up our discussion of Final Fantasy Tactics by Japanese developer Square Enix. This is a remaster of my all-time favorite game. Does it live up to the hype? Our expectations were sky high, but nostalgia can be a tricky beast. I'm your host, Tom Sidlogic, and joining me for the discussion today are the Professor, Mike Mathwig.
Evening.
Munch Time, John Munch.
6'7"? 6'7".
And the Hobby Box, Joe Burns.
Hey-o.
He just loves the 6'7" reference.
Oh, boy. Starting off strong.
Yeah. Outside is Overrated is presented by Premier Health. Check out their website at premierhealthmn.com. That's Premier Health, MN as in Minnesota.com. In this monthly standalone segment of the podcast, we play a game with our podcast community and invite all of our Patreon supporters to join the discussion. If you want to join in, support Outside is Overrated on Patreon at patreon.com/OiO. You can support the show for as little as $2 a month. I'll start by setting some expectations for this podcast. Final Fantasy Tactics is a remaster of the groundbreaking classic from 1997. Here's what we're going to cover today. Is the job system still the greatest Final Fantasy thing of all time? We're going to talk about our favorite additions to the traditional tactics formula. We're going to express our thoughts and feelings on the overall cast and get into final impressions of the story. Final Fantasy Tactics: The Ivalice Chronicles released in September of 2025 and has a Metacritic rating of 88. In Final Fantasy Tactics, you play as young noble Ramza Beowulf, navigating the political chaos of the War of the Lions. It's a story of loyalty, betrayal, and how history forgets those who fight for what's right. You command small squads on tactical, grid-based battlefields. One of the challenges lies in mastering dozens of classes and abilities while navigating a dense story full of political and religious intrigue. Let's pick up on our discussion from last month on the job system. To summarize our previous thoughts, I think we all enjoyed fighting battles to earn XP and job points. We enjoyed buying abilities, and we liked tinkering and changing the different jobs. So John, did that formula stay fresh through the back end of the game for you?
Yeah, the entire time, right? I wasn't bored at all. I mean, it was even fun when I got into like the doldrums of like grinding to get the platinum, right? Just hitting that meditative state of like going in and like setting up my little like, job point farm of like, great, I got this guy trapped in a corner and now I can just spam yell, and farm job points. It was great. So yeah, the system still is a ton of fun. It's still fun to play around and like find different combinations and try different skills and just have fun with it.
Mike, what about you?
Oh yeah, the magic is still there. It goes all the way through. I mean, even when I was in the end game, I was still sitting there arguing with myself about, what's the best combination of jobs and abilities and equipment to use for this battle, which group am I going to roll with? In a game where the job system is, a lot less interesting, I had just settled on 5 people and probably just used them all the way through, but I was constantly rotating and changing in this one.
Well, let me poke at that, and Burns, I'll give you a minute to make your point in just a minute, but for me, I found that I had a few key things, and I'd get those with all of my main characters, and then I just rely on those things. Like, the magic wore off for me about 2/3 of the way through the game, and like, I'll always have nostalgia for going from Squire to Knight or Chemist to Black Mage and the beginnings of this tree. But at the end of the game, I didn't feel like there was a lot of variety there for the builds. It's like, okay, well, I need my Dragoon, I need my Ninja, I need my Bard, I need my Dancer, I need my Mime.
Yeah, and like to pile onto that, some of those later classes, it feels like you just need to exist as them to get the JP for a while before they're actually useful, which is weird. I think it's a little bit more of a niche class, but arithmetician, it's kind of like I have to just gain I have to gain JP in order to actually use their ability. Because you have to spend, I think it's like 700 JP to just do like one combination of things.
Yeah.
And it's like some of that's just it just takes forever to try to do that. And I think that's one of the things where with this game, um, I enjoy unlocking things with classes, and I enjoy like the whole like aspect of being able to build that stuff up. It just takes so long to do it, and it just sort of feels like even with JP boost on some of your characters, you just don't earn enough fast enough, and you have to kind of devote time to do so much side stuff in order to actually try to make a lot of progress. If that's what you're trying to do in a certain class, and I feel like that then sort of slows you down from maybe the other things that the game is trying to get you to do with like the main story and everything.
And much like Ramza and Delita, like Burns and I are heading to the same point, but we're taking vastly different directions to get there. Because I had my problems with the job system, but for me, it was like once I got to those high end jobs, like once I got the ninja, once I got my dragoon, like powerful, it's like, oh, well, now what? It's like I'm not gonna take them to be a time mage now that my dragoon is all BA.
Right.
So like I loved getting to each job. I loved unlocking the jobs, and then I loved getting like my first character there. And it's like, oh, here's how they impact the game. This is great. But then like I mastered it. It's like, oh, I don't really want to make my 18th monk. So I guess you're just gonna stay here, Decima, as my dragoon, and life will move on without you. So and that ties into something, Burns, I think you wanted to say about the job system.
Yeah, I mean, so it's one of those things where, especially with the named characters, Rams is a little bit different, but with the named characters, um, they have their kind of capstone class that takes the spot of Squire for them, basically. And that's all like really good stuff that you're earning and that you're learning with that. And with Ramza, I started going through and trying to learn different things with him, which I think was fun. But once you recruit stronger characters at the end, you just end up using them over some of these other people that you maybe were trying to level throughout the game. Like, a slight spoiler, once you get Sid in your party, it's kind of like, why would you not use him? Because unless you're really just trying to make the game harder for yourself, because he is just so vastly overpowered compared to, at least for me, he was vastly overpowered compared to the other characters that I had, like by leaps and bounds. And so it was just kind of like, I guess I could not use him and try to like really, struggle through these battles, but otherwise it's just like, no, why wouldn't I use him?
And John, I'm going to jump in real quick before you make your point. The game, the game even like knows that and acknowledges that because there is specific dialogue for Sid in those different battles that like
Yes.
you'd miss if you didn't have him in the party. And it's the same thing with Agrius around an earlier difficulty spike, I think in chapter 2. And it's like, oh, well, like I want to know which characters say the things, so those characters are in my party. I had a very unconventional makeup for the final boss, and so like I got to hear some things that I didn't expect to, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But like, man, it's like if I have to roll with Orlando through the latter chapter of the game, it's great. He's awesome. He's powerful. I enjoyed it. It was fun. But it's like Decima, Wolfhilda, like these are my characters that I built up from level 1 and had with me for 50-ish hours. And it's like, oh, well, you just go on the bench for the latter half of the game. You're no longer important because you can't chop up all of the mage's magic powers. So thanks for everything. I'll just discard you like Delita.
It's the XCOM effect, right? I played this time playing through. I kept the same crew the entire time, right? Until the end, where I'm like, okay, come on, Sid, clean house. And you do it every time, right? Because I'm like, yeah, it just makes sense. Why am I not going to bring him in? So you do have to leave people on the bench. And like the other thing that I don't like about that part as well is, the main job for those characters, like Sid and Agris, right? Like, okay, you get that. You then switch them over to Knight so you don't lose Sword. And then that's all you do with them, right? Maybe you drop them into, Chemist to get auto potion real quick, or you drop them over to like Time Mage to get man a wall or this or that. You get one or two little key things you need to make them even more powerful, but you don't ever really tweak uh, those named characters. The only one I ever really liked that I used to play with a lot was Mustadio, right? Because I always made him my chemist, right? And then,
Yeah.
oh, he could throw potions all over the place and then have a gun. And then, like, he had his aim as a chemist. And that was always an awesome combo. So I wish they would have done more things like that where you aren't just saying, oh, well, this person is a holy knight, so they have cool things with the sword. Oh, these people are basically geomancers, right? Like Rafa, right? And like it's a little bit different and a little random. They I would have rather seen them utilize those characters more as guest characters like Delita and those other ones. So they're still there, they're still doing things, and maybe have more just text scenes, right? Because you do get some really cool things, right? I can't remember her name. It's the daughter of, her brother gets killed. The dad is like the second to last boss or whatever, right? And like
Yeah,
I was
is
bring,
Yeah.
is that
yeah.
Rafa and Malik?
No,
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 not
no.
Rafa and Malik. It's
It's something Melia Duel or something like that.
yeah,
Isn't
Melee
it?
Duel. Yep.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Right, I was bringing her with everywhere because I was like, oh, I want to see what happens when I go to kill her dad with her in the party. Are they gonna do anything? Are they gonna and like there's a couple little things they said here or there, but it wasn't anything crazy. But like those are things that I think would have been cool. Like you have these characters that are all connected, right? Even if you would have just brought everybody onto the board to have the scene, right? And then like battle start and then like Sid disappears and the name characters disappear and it's just your crew. I think would have still been fine and given you more world building and then let you use your awesome characters more.
Yeah. That would be a
It,
very
de-
elegant solution.
it depends on your approach. I didn't use Sid in one single battle the entire time I had him.
Do you hate fun and winning?
No,
No
'cause
wonder
he
he
didn't-
just wrapped it up 5 minutes before we got to you.
I didn't need him. I mean, if you organize your characters enough and use the right abilities, you don't need to have Sid even in the final battles. Although I'm sure he'd use. I did use Agrias a lot just because she came in so early. She felt like a member of the party, unlike him who came in so late. I was kind of like, you're a cool guy, but I don't really have any attachment to you. Plus, I like to use the one. I don't know if we want to include. Are we worried about spoilers here?
No, there's a pretty clear spoiler call later on, but if you're listening to our part 2 discussion, we're about to spoil things from the job system, and we'll get into characters and story later.
Because I did use Cloud quite a bit once I got him too, just because he's Cloud. I mean, what are you gonna do?
Yeah, but it's so late in the game, like it's hard to
Yeah.
make him useful and viable.
No, it wasn't.
Like,
Now once you get his
Oh,
sword, he becomes powerful really fast.
he's gonna be like my master poacher. I look forward to chasing the platinum with him.
and I think one thing that the remake does different, right? And it's actually one of the quality of life things I was going to talk about later, but it fits here is, you can avoid all battles, right? So in the original, right, like no, and War of the Lions and all the other versions, when you were traveling in between towns, if you got into a fight, you got into a fight. So you naturally leveled up those characters because you had all those extra things to do. You weren't zooming through and be like, I'm going to run around and go back and forth and like avoid all the fights I want and just do these ones. You were doing all these other fights. So it made sense to bring in your second tier characters or, all right, now I'm going to have this guy work on being an arithmetic so that, by the time I reach the story battle, he has all those skills. Right. So I do think like, while I love that quality of life piece of it, it does also deter a little bit and then make it feel a little bit more grindy. We're like, oh, I want to use this job. Let me go ahead and like now just go over and grind a bunch of levels so now I can use it type of feel.
Sort of along those same lines, one of the things that I kind of disliked is that throughout the entire game, if you ever recruit anybody from any of the Warriors Guilds or whatever they're called, in any of the towns, they always start at level 1. And it's just like, as the game goes on, like, what's the worth of me getting someone that's level 1 at this point? It's like, I'm not going to sit here and try to do 30 side battles to get them to level 12. I mean, you know, and I don't, it didn't seem like the few times that I did it that you like earned extra experience or JP from them being that much lower level than the rest of the
They get more
classes.
experience.
Do they get
They
more
do get a
experience?
higher rate of experience
Okay.
if they're lower level.
Yeah, and maybe I just because eventually I just stopped doing it, and so I probably just stopped doing it early enough that the distance wasn't as great. You know, once you get past, I think it's like once you get into Act 3, you really start getting so many like side characters that come into your party that it's just like, all right, well, yeah, you guys are just doing errands for me the rest of the time. Hope you enjoy that. It seems like you do every time you come back. So, you know, that's just what your role is, and then it's like you remember that they earn JP going out for those, and then like you go into one of them, and it's like, oh, you've got 3,000 JP for Squire. Well, it looks like we wasted some. It looks like we wasted some JP on you. My bad. Um, but I don't know. So it's just some of that stuff. Like it makes sense if because it seems like there's some sort of like level rubber banding that happens when characters join, when the side characters like are recruited into your party and they start at like the same level or very close to the level that Rams is at that point. It would make sense if even if it wasn't at the level, it was like in chapter 2 they're level, you know, they're level 5. In chapter 3 they're level 15 or something like that, something that's a little bit closer instead of just like level 1.
Yeah, or if they
Granted,
didn't have to like start as a squire or a chemist either. Like if you could buy a
right,
time mage that had like haste already, be like, oh,
right,
that's real hopeful.
Well, and I think it's kind of one of those systems though that like you're not supposed to use after the beginning
right.
because the better thing to do is to use your orator and just like basically convince people to join your party,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's what you're doing is
Yep.
you say convince them to join your party and then you go to another mission because they have all the skills you want and you kill them, turn them into a crystal and then take their skills. That's what you do, right? You turn yourself into a skill murder farmer.
John, you played this game much more like Deleted than I did.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah. It's a very non-Ramza way to approach things.
Well, we've talked about a lot of different characters already, but I want to come back to the job system. Mike, you said that the magic held all the way through. So what ended up being your favorite jobs and your favorite abilities across all of Tactics?
I went in and I was intentionally trying to avoid the breaking the game kind of strats that you can do in this. So I wasn't trying to manipulate the faith of the brave or, that type of thing. So, it was more just playing with the classes. I love Dragoon. I always have. That's always been my favorite. Ninja's fun. You can't argue with two swords. And then I'd roll with a summoner with the time mage as their secondary skill is pretty much always in the party. But the one thing I did different this time is I did try to use monk skills as my primary secondary skill class for all my melee characters. And man, I had a lot of fun with that. Monk skills are terrific as a secondary skill set for any physical character.
That was such a great tip that you gave us in part one, Mike. Like I use that a lot too. And like having revive and chakra, those had to be my two most used skills. Like especially mid tier of the game, like lots of characters had to have revive. My time mage started as a white mage, so she could raise. My two main melee characters both had monk as their side stuff, so they could revive and do chakra. And it's like, without those skills, I don't know how I would have made it through this game.
Yeah, I ended up doing that a lot as well with the melee characters because you get to monk so fast too, because you spend however long you need to at night and then you GTFO because none of those abilities feel like they're very worthwhile. But I don't know. The interesting thing, because you were talking about ninja, and it's just like I used ninja once, or like in 2 battles, and then it was just like I'm not unlocking anything with this, so why am I sitting in this class? And so then I jumped to whatever was going to help me unlock another job for. I think it was Ramza was the only one that I had a ninja for like 2 things, and it was like I threw stuff at somebody once. It did a little bit of damage, and so I was just like, all right, well that was all right. Time to go be a dragoon, so I can see what I unlocked down at the bottom here.
Well, throwing isn't the way to go with the ninja. The
No,
true
I
value
know.
of the ninja is the dual wielding. But Bernsey, I gotta ask, I'm gonna take us in a slightly different direction here. How did you get through the end of chapter 3 without a ninja in your party? So Rio Vane's Castle. Spoiler alert for a 30-year-old game, but Rio Vane's Castle, it is a 3-stage battle at the end. The first stage is challenging outside of a castle. The second stage is infuriating inside the castle. And then the third phase takes place on the roof with 2 assassins. That nearly derailed my entire playthrough. Like, one night, I tried that for like an hour, hour and a half. I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to play this game again, because I didn't want to back out of the overall. It's a 3-tier battle, so if you back out to the world map to grind out more levels, you lose those first 2 battles, and I did not want to fight Weegraph again. So I'll talk about how I got through it in a minute, but Burns, I'm just curious how you did it without a ninja.
Yeah, so I promise I'm going to answer your question, but I need to take a second of a stroll to do it. So I have a sickness, and it became very problematic in this game that, especially if I have like one of those weapons when you poach, and it's like you can really only get it from that until way later in the game or whatever. If that gets stolen or broken, I have to restart the fight. Or if, things go badly, I have to restart the fight. So it got to the point where at the start of chapter 3, I think it was at the start of chapter 3, I was replaying things so much that I was just like, all right, I'm never going to finish this game. And so I dropped it down to the lowest difficulty so I could just, plow through. And you still do run into a few things that make things a little bit more difficult, but it definitely took a lot of the edge off of the game. Which, it's one of those things where, if I wasn't playing this to try to finish it for the podcast, I maybe would have stayed with it, because then I would have the time to be just like, okay, I can spend, a whole night session trying to get through this with the difficulty that it was at. But yeah, there's no way I would have probably even gotten through chapter 3 by this point if I would have not turned the difficulty down.
Sure, and like turning the difficulty down, perfectly viable option, especially trying to play something on a deadline. I didn't do that. I got to this hard spot, and like no matter what I tried resetting my party multiple times. I tried everyone in my cast of characters. It's like, can somebody get up to the roof fast enough? But what happened every single time was that they would cast Ultima on what's her name that you're trying to protect in that mission, and like she'd be dead before I could even get characters up on the roof. And it's like, eventually, like after a very frustrating night of playing, I put it down. I'm like, I just have to back out. And if I don't finish the game in time, I don't finish the game in time. But it's like, no, I didn't have a tool in my toolbox to overcome that. So what I wound up doing was I had to back out. I ground out some levels. I unlocked different classes, and I went back and I had a ninja in my party. Ninja goes first. Ninja goes before the assassins, gets up on the roof, completely resets the RNG, and I just demolish the first assassin. Like, before all of my party gets to act, I'm like, that is not a fun experience. I have claimed Tactics as my favorite game for damn near 20 years, if not longer. And, like, that experience on Rio Vane's Castle was a huge bummer. And, like, it is asinine a thing as having a ninja in your party to go fast enough to jack up their RNG. And it's like, that was really the solution. Like, that was very disappointing for me. John, Mike, do either of you have a differing take on what happened at Rio Vane's Castle?
I mean, ninja was the way I went. And it's always the way, like, I mean, ninja and double weapons is just, like, as soon as I can unlock that, I'm doing it. It's just amazing. So, like, I didn't have that problem because I had 2 ninjas in my party, right? I would, I would always run with Ramza, a magic user, right? Usually a named character, which is usually Agrius, and then, like, one of my 2 other grunts, and they're usually filtering between 2 ninjas or a ninja and a samurai or whatever I want to play around with. So for that battle, I was like, oh, just make them both ninjas. They can jump up there and they're good to go, right? And ninjas plus like move plus 3, once you get that, they're like insane. The other thing that, I would do, it doesn't help me in this battle because they're on the other end of the spectrum, is I play with a calculator, right? Like, as soon as you unlock that, that's just the most amazing class in the world because you can do whatever you want.
Right?
Arithmetician in this version. Yeah. Right. But like that's fun too to just to be able to like, cast on everybody and like, yeah, you know what? I'll kill my guy here because he's got mana shield and he's protected, and then watch everybody die. Right? I won many a battle by like scorch earthing and killing everyone on the field, right, except for one of my characters.
That's wild. My experience with the arithmetician or arithmetic was different. I couldn't figure out how it worked, and when I don't understand how the abilities work, I just buy them in order. And so, like, I bought. You need three things with the arithmetic. You need like a trigger. You need a number thing. Like basically, you need three different categories of things, and if you buy them top to bottom, you don't get your triggers until the end. So like, I'm like,
Oh, no.
arithmetic. Like that was a massive slog for me. So my arithmetic was a bard, just like boosting speed, saying, "Dear God, let's get fast enough to master this class and move on to something." And then like right at the end, once I started getting some triggers, I'm like, "Oh, I can revive literally my entire party at once." That just
Yep.
changed this entire battle. I was like, "Oh, this is a good class that I just didn't understand how to use." I think that's the only class that I really botched on this playthrough, but like I don't know, it wasn't particularly well explained how the arithmetic works. I want to back up to another specific battle. The middle of Riovane's castle, you fight Wheatgraf, then he turns into a Lucavi, and you have to fight him again. Then with your whole party, and any hit points that you lost in the first phase carries over to the second phase. That was a major stumbling block for me way back in the day. It was still a major stumbling block for me. And I talked about my flash mode in our part one discussion, where the only way that I could ever beat Wheatgraf back in the day was to just boost my speed, running around the map, hiding from him, until I could go like 4 times in a row. And I've now put 60 plus hours into Final Fantasy Tactics: The Ivalice Chronicles, and I still don't think there's another way to beat him. So I did it as a Dragoon this time, boosting my speed, and then like jumping on him so fast that he couldn't react. But I'm curious how you guys tackled Wheatgraf towards the end of Chapter 3.
Auto potion and ninja, right? So
Yeah. I didn't use auto potion. I used a different defensive ability. The one that got me through that fight was critical hit points restore. So like if you get into the critical phase, you have a percentage chance of hitting your hit points. So that's how I got through him the first time when I had to eventually back out for world mode and then go back to the world map to grind out some more levels.
yeah,
The second time, he never really had a chance to hit me because I just wasn't dicking around with him anymore.
And the problem with auto potion is it doesn't proc all the time, right? So in that first fight, right, I was oftentimes like, okay, I got to just reload and do this so many times so I can get the right combo of my auto potions hitting and like and him not blocking both my sword attacks, right? And that is what won it. Although if I ever play through again, I'm gonna try and do a run where I don't use auto potion, but I use like the mana shield, because that's what I started using at endgame. Because there's a really really weird thing with this. If you're playing the normal story battles, things scale with you, right? But when you start doing, like, if you're level 99 and you're trying to fight level 99 monsters, it's nigh impossible because your weapons don't scale with the monster's like native strength and everything. So they can just demolish you. But if you use mana shield, right, then like any hit they do takes from your mana first, and all you need is 1 mana point. So I'm like, oh, well, just use chakra and now I'm safe again, right? So it turned into this like I can be a mana battery and take all this damage without really being a threat.
Yeah, I didn't like the monster scaling back in the day. I still don't like it now. So now I'm going to jump towards the end of the game. Tell me if this is the most unconventional build you can think of for the final fight or the final couple of fights in the game. What I rolled with to fight Ultima or Ajora was Ramza, of course, or Landu, because he was indispensable at that point. But then I also had Beowulf, and I had Reese, and I had a dragon that I tamed in the second to last battle.
Good choices. The dragon's interesting, but they can be super powerful.
Yeah,
They can be.
he had an ability that did 999 damage. Like the tricky part was he had to live, and I had to position my dudes so that they wouldn't also be hit by it. But I beat the game with Ramza as a mime, and the Beowulf was a bard. So he would boost speed, Ramza would copy it, and then everyone would flee so that Flea Ultima wouldn't kill him, and then just get the dragon in position. It not super satisfying, but Beowulf and Reese had custom dialogue for that scene. I'm like, oh, well, that's really interesting. I'm glad that I randomly was these two that didn't seem like they fit in the puzzle at all. Yeah, so Dragonkin was my favorite class, and you get it with Reese towards the end of the game. And I don't know what I'd do with her, like, after mastering it. I guess just play with other characters, because I'm certainly not going to make her a chemist.
Well, but with some of them, they have specific specific jobs that they already have like a set amount of like JP, like an affinity with that job. So like with her, she has dancer as kind of like, because like at least when I had her, when I was like looking at her, it's like she had like 600 some JP built up for dancer, and she already knew a bunch of the abilities. So it's like that's kind of the second job that you could jump into with her, outside of doing the Dragonkin stuff once you learn all of those things. So it seems like, because I think with Cloud, Dragoon is his second one, if I remember correctly. I might be thinking of a different character, but I'm pretty sure with Cloud it was Dragoon. And so each one of them seems to have like, and then it was Bard for Beowulf. So that is one thing that's kind of nice, is it's like, okay, this is where you can go, if you're looking at doing something else with this person.
It's interesting, and especially with Reese having dancer, like a dancer affinity, because that was my go-to towards the end of the game. Like Ramza as a mime plus dancer plus bard. It's like slow everyone else down, speed us up, and just watch Orlando mow through everything. Good stuff. Anything else you guys want to talk about with jobs or abilities, or should we jump on to quality of life improvements?
Just one thing, completely random, right? So tonight I platinum Final Fantasy 3, right? And the like origination of this job system. And I do find it very, very interesting that the system has endured decades, right? And evolved. And like I'm looking forward to Final Fantasy 5 to see like the kind of middle step here. But it was interesting to see what made its way over, and actually like correlation between like some of the jobs. Like Ninja in Final Fantasy 3, totally OP, right? It's the like the top class, right? But like also like would have been really cool to see some of those other classes make it like Dark Knight or this or that, which I guess you kind of do see with like some of the side characters have those Dark Knight skills. So interesting how they like said, hey, these are the playable classes that you can have. We're going to take other classes and we're going to make them non-playable and make them other people. So just a really cool history thing. If you're interested in the job system, right, pick up Pixel Remaster, go back and play Final Fantasy 3. It's just kind of a fun thing to kind of experience, to kind of see like the history of where it started.
Yeah, ironically, I have been doing that. Not related. So last month we talked about some of the improvements in this version of the game. Looking back, Birdsey, what was your favorite addition to the classic experience?
I mean, I really didn't play enough of the previous version to have a ton to compare it to. It's probably just being able to flee the battles, because I tend to like to do things in chunks. And so it's like, all right, I want to go around to all the towns and I want to do all of the errands. And I have like my group of bench people. And so it's like I'll drop a couple people off in this town to do these errands. I'll run to this town and do these errands, and just like to sort of float around. And it's like sometimes I feel like doing some of the random fights in between, but not like every time. And so I feel like that's probably the best thing, or the one thing that really stood out to me. Otherwise, I don't think I really played enough of the PlayStation version to really have a lot of other things stand out to me. Voice acting's great too, but
I'm going to piggyback off the first part of your statement. Like, the ability to skip battles was great. We mentioned that, but like, you can also force battles when you want to. And at least in my observation, it seemed like monsters were less intense in the early areas of the game. So like, that's where I'd want to go to grind. And it's like, okay, when I got my butt kicked in Rio Vane's castle, like, let's go back to the Nanalia Plains for a little while. Let's fight some chocobos and some cats, and let's unlock some more job classes and see if that gets us over the humps. Like, I really like the ability to pick where you fight, where and when you fight.
Yeah, I agree 100%. That was the biggest thing to me, was it's my choice if I'm going to have a random battle here or not. And then if I want to go get some random battles, I can decide where I want to have them, which is just, it's a small thing, but it just makes it so much more convenient and enjoyable when you're trying to grind out some levels or work on some jobs, to have that choice in your hands rather than just have to wander around and see what you get.
I think another thing when you're talking about choice and battles too, what it does is like it makes it so much easier to leave, right? Right. I mean, like, oh, PlayStation 1, if you better save before every battle, because if you go in there and it's that freaking 12 monk battle or whatever it is, like you're dead, right? So like you could get in and you'd be like, nope, don't like this RNG of characters, I'm out. Right? Or especially like when you're going for the platinum, it's super nice because you're like, oh nope, these aren't the monsters I need to kill to get the poaching I need. So reload, right? Just go out and come back in. So that was really nice, and I think they do a good job too of updating. Tom, you talked about the multi-stage battles, right? Where it's really easy to change your team up on the fly. You can get creative. You can say, restart me from this battle, restart me from the very first one, and you can mess around with that. So I thought that was really good as well, giving you that ability to say, this party's not jiving right now. I'm going to go ahead and easily tweak this so that I can come in and make this guy a ninja or do this or do that without having to like cancel out everything and go back to the very beginning and start the whole thing over just to try a new build.
Yeah. What about within the battles, John? Did anything stand out?
Yeah, the one other thing that I loved in the battles was they stole it from Tactics Ogre, right? Like, it's the turn order on the left hand side, right? I mean, that's just huge quality of life. You're not sitting there looking at like, oh, let me run around and like highlight what everybody's CP is so I can understand, when they're going next, or like if I'm gonna cast this thing, who's going before me, so I can make sure he's gonna be standing in the spot. It basically, anytime you take data that's readily available, right? It's there that I was digging for before, and you just make it easy for me to see it. That's just good game design, because you're not making me waste my time trying to like dig through menus to figure out who's gonna be where, right? You just give me what I'm gonna be looking for.
Yeah, that was awesome. I am surprised that none of you mentioned the collection. Like, that was new in this game, right? Like, they collected all of the events from the game, all the characters. There's tons of stuff that you could read. They made new movies that weren't in the original game. So, like, there's a lot of cool stuff within there. Like, I'm not a huge lore person. I have, monsters to fight and XP to earn, but, like, I appreciated its inclusion, and I'm just surprised that it wasn't, like, top of the list for any of you guys.
I think it is really cool. Now you mentioned like, yeah, we should have said that, because like they stole from Final Fantasy 16, right? And they took that whole system of like being able, like, especially when you're doing like with like all these different characters and war and this and that. It was always good to be able to go in and like see, oh, this is where this is going, and this is over here, and this battle happened here, to kind of understand the world. So that was a cool addition. I liked it.
Yeah, good stuff.
Were
And
the new little films, were those from the War of the Lions version, or are those new to this version?
I'm pretty sure they were from the War of the Lions version.
I was guessing, but I never played that version, so I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I think I looked it up, and I think that's what I saw, but I could be wrong.
Huh. They're cool. I'm glad they existed.
Yeah.
So from here on, we're going to talk about characters and the overall story. There are highly likely to be spoilers in the character section, and there will certainly be more spoilers in the story section. So that's your warning. Spoiler alert, spoiler alert. Building off of our discussion of the job system, we'll start by talking about the cast of characters. You start out with Ramza, Delita, and Argath, then you set off as Ramza and a squad of anonymous characters. Throughout the story, new characters are introduced until you have a virtual flood of avatars on the party screen.
Potty screen.
Potty screen, yeah, I don't have young
Different
kids
screen
going
entirely.
through stuff. Yeah. John, did you appreciate the rollout of new characters, both the ones required for the main story and the side stories?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, we kind of already touched on this a little bit. I think bringing in all the characters and like making them part of your team, right, always felt well earned. I always liked when the people were joining into my party. It felt like we were, collecting and making this army, right? Which, like, in my head canon, it's nice to be able to think like, oh yeah, like you're not just Ramza and 4 people. You're like a whole army that is taking on other whole armies, and we're just seeing, a sub snapshot of that battle. I think what's not totally necessary though is like, everyone becoming like your team, like we talked about earlier, right? Like making them, side characters or guest characters, or even just having them along for the ride, so that they are in the story, I think would have been sufficient enough. But, it's cool that you get to play as them too.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, you get Agrias and Mustadio pretty early, and I got the robot pretty early, but they were adding new characters that you picked up as your party to the very end, just about. I mean, how late in the game did we pick up Melee Duel? That was, practically
Like,
at the end game.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, that was maybe a pacing issue they could have handled better.
Like, I thought the named characters were cool, and like I liked having them around, but like I didn't have time to use everybody. And it's like once I
Yeah.
maxed out their unique job, it's like, oh well, cool. Go sit with Mustadio on the bench. Okay, bye. See ya. See you next playthrough.
That's funny. Like Mustadio is basically, so it was Mustadio and Agrias I would use in pretty much every fight along with Ramza. And then I had my one guy that was down the wizard tree, and then I had one or two people that were down the melee tree or the attacking tree. And so it was basically a combination of those people would then filter in with those three. And once I maxed out Archer with Mustadio, I started to go through the power fantasy that is having Mustadio as a white mage. Um,
Sounds
which,
awesome.
well, but then it's like I have the equipped crossbow on him, so he would have a crossbow for when I didn't need to heal people, so I could still shoot things with him. And so, I don't know. I felt like it was just fun to mess around with. If I was not playing on the easiest difficulty level, I probably wouldn't have had any success with it. But it was fun to muck about with it at least. But yeah, like Sid basically is just like, oh, you're better, Agrias. Well, it was fun using you, Agrias. But though it was fun, I mean, probably the most used attack that I had in the entire game was probably Hallowed Bolt. And so having two uses of Hallowed Bolt per cycle through characters is two times as much fun. So yeah, I don't know. I agree that I think there could have been a little bit more balance to it. I am glad that they had fewer guest characters during fights, because nothing sucks more than having them just sort of throw off the entire cadence of what you're trying to do by running ahead and dying. And I did have one fight where I used my orator to get somebody to be a traitor for my cause, and I was trying to gather their last resources and leave one person alive, and the guy tracked the person down and killed him. It's just like I was two steps away from the last chest I needed, you bastard. But yeah, I don't know. I think the story is a lot of fun. I think when you get the characters, it makes sense. But it doesn't make sense that you get them so close to the end of the game because you really can't do a whole lot to level them up at that point.
Yeah, and that's crushing. Like comparing this game to Disgaea, which is I played the first and the fifth entries in Disgaea, and the first Disgaea game, it doesn't have any random encounters. So you play a series of encounters, and each one is basically a story mission. But then, whenever you want, you can just jump in a portal, go back to that story mission. So if you want to level up the B, C, or D squad, you can take them all the way back to the first chapter and like pound on some weak dudes to like bring them up to speed. And like I just desperately wanted that in tactics because like those random encounters are hard, man. And like I was constantly pushed to my limits. It's like with the enemies scaling with or perhaps just a touch above you, like it is hard to bring any B squad characters in there. And it's like, I loved Agrias too. I have a lot of affinity from Agrias from my very first playthrough, but it's like at some point it's like, well, I gotta roll with the good people, and like now that you're a knight, not a holy knight, like smell you later, Agrias. See you next playthrough, I guess.
Didn't we establish though that you were playing on tactician difficulty, right?
I was, yeah.
Well, but that makes a difference. You're not playing on when you're not playing on standard difficulty, you have fewer options. You intentionally made the game hard, so it does streamline your choices. But that's a choice you made to play it on a harder than normal difficulty. So that's
Well, yeah,
on
because
you.
I'm like super duper smart, and apparently I'm like just better than everybody.
Or you're a
Just saying, I think
masochist and
had
you
a
like
different experience on standard difficulty.
Yeah, there was one other sticking point that I had in chapter 4, and like again, I thought it was going to be the end of the game for me. Like, it's called Fnath Falls or something, but there's a battle that tends to have a lot of chocobos, and like I went in there, and there were 8 black chocobos, and I'm like, what the frick, like, and like so like back out of that one. Well, I didn't back out of that one. I didn't live long enough to back out of that one, as my party was just massacred in half a turn by like meteors. It's like, all right, well, I guess we'll try some other stuff and come back to it. Came back to it, and it was like only 6 black chocobos, but 3 red ones. It's like, oh, well, that was equally punishing, but that at least gave me the seed that there's some RNG with the enemies in that one. So it's like, all right, well, eventually I level up a bit, and it's like, well, I'm either gonna pass this border or I'm not. And just like go in, check the composition. 3 yellow chocobos. I have a chance if I can kill them before they can heal anything. Let's roll with that one. And like, eventually I did it with Beowulf and Reese, and it's like, okay, well, thanks for saving the day. Let's try to race through the rest of the story now. Stupid chocobos. So the name characters are great. There's a ton of them, and it's hard to give each one of them like ample playtime because like you only get to bring 5 people into a fight. So we'll move from there on to the plot of Final Fantasy Tactics. This is going to be a little bit monologue-y. My apologies to the world. Chapter 1 introduces Ramza and Delita as young men caught between class and loyalty, culminating in a personal tragedy that pushes them onto very different paths. It establishes Tactics as a story about power, injustice, and how history is shaped by those who survive it. In Chapter 2, Ramza abandons noble life and tries to stay outside the war, only to discover that the conflict itself is being manipulated behind the scenes. This chapter broadens the scope from personal loss to systemic corruption and introduces the supernatural threat of the Zodiac Stones. Chapter 3 pulls back the curtain on the church, revealing how faith, history, and fear are being weaponized to control the population. By this point, Ramza is no longer reacting to events, he's actively opposing institutions far larger than himself. Chapter 4 is where all of these threads collide. Politics, religion, and the supernatural escalate into an open struggle over who gets to define truth and power in Evilis. Ramza's role is no longer about reclaiming honor or stopping a war, but about resisting a world that is willing to rewrite reality itself. So, Mike, looking back, you played the original game, you just finished the remaster literally minutes before jumping into recording here. What part of Tactics story sticks with you the most? Is it a character, a moment, or a theme?
It's the core dynamic between Ramza and Delita. It always has been, to me, what this game is Ramza and Delita in the end. You know, you have these 2 guys who start out as friends and companions. They make wildly different choices and end up in wildly different situations at the end of the game. You know, Ramza is a disgraced heretic who's abandoned his family name, and Delita rises to be king. But in the end, Ramza is left free with friends and companions, and Delita is just well and truly alone, and nobody trusts him. And you can tell at the end, he has no chance of having a happy life at that point. He got what he wanted, but it left him in a terrible situation as a person.
And I feel like you should watch the credits roll and then watch just a little bit more, Mike.
I did. And I knew what happened. I mean, that happened in the original. They didn't change that. You know,
yeah.
Where his wife, the queen, stabs him and tries to kill him because she thinks that he will probably throw her away and betray her too, which he probably would have. Who knows? It's hard to say. Maybe he did love her. Maybe he'd have thrown her away. We don't know.
Yeah, well, there's certainly enough evidence that he would have probably discarded her at some point.
Yep.
Bernsey, what stands out to you from the experience?
So one of my favorite things, and I had to take like a screenshot of it when I played the game, that just it struck me as just supremely funny is you're in the fight where the not the High Confessor, but one of the Confessor dudes is there to kill Ramza, basically, right? After Ramza and Delita are meeting in the church. And it's like, I think it's Agrius and Mustadio and Ramza are like talking back and forth. And Delita is just like, what maudlin drivel is this? And to spout it in the midst of battle, no less. And it's just, I lost it because I really do like the aspect of like the sort of conversations that happen in the battle, but to have somebody kind of like just sort of pipe in and be like, "We're supposed to be just killing people here. Why are we talking about this stupid?" It just made me laugh so much. Um, so I don't know. I do really enjoy Rams's development. I know in the first episode when we were talking, I had mentioned that I felt like Delita. To me, at that point, it felt like Delita. And at that point, I was near the end of chapter 2, that he was a much better, more interesting character and seemed to be kind of driving things a lot more in the story than Ramza did. But I think the development that they do with Ramza throughout like the third chapter especially I think is just really well done, and you really do start to really fall in love with him as a character. And you do get to see like this is what he stands for, and what is probably right for the country, and and for just everybody in general. And it's funny because Ramza is this person that is like of the aristocracy, and everybody just assumes that that's how he looks at everything in the world, including even Delita to some extent, even though Delita should know better. But really, what Rams is doing is trying to do what's right for the common people. And it's not like he's ashamed of the Beowulf name or whatever. And I think he's proud to be a Beowulf. He doesn't agree with what his brothers have done, you know. But he's actually just doing what's right for the country. Whereas I think Delita is wrapping himself in what he thinks is right for the country. But it really is much more so to try to make him above everybody else because he's always been beneath everybody else. And it's really interesting to see that kind of flip flop as the story sort of develops into chapter 4, where you really start to see that, I think Delita does believe in the fact that he's doing something that's going to be right for the masses and right for the common folk that he's come from, but it has to end in him being the king and him being the person that is above everything else and basically becoming what it is that he never wanted to be, and was, always fighting against, which I think it's kind of ironic how all of that kind of sort of starts to shape up as you get through the middle to end parts of chapter 4.
Yeah, that savior complex is going to get you every time, man.
Hey,
like you on the Rams and Delita train as well?
I mean, it's central to the story. It's fantastic. But this time around, I think some of the things that really hit me was just the Bayo family and all the betrayal and everything that took place in a lot of these scenes. I think it's in War of the Lions, right? You actually don't fight zombie Zalbag. You fight zombie Algus, right? Or Argith or whatever they're calling him in that version, right? And that scene to me was like, that was one of the hardest, like that one hit hard, right? So you already have like, look, Ramza deals with like losing everything, right? He thinks his best friend is dead, right? He sees his brother like order this close, like basically his sister to get shot, right? Like, so Zalbag isn't, completely complicit in all this. And then like turns out, nope, we also killed Dystar killed our dad too, right? Like all these things happen, right? And like it's just the hits keep coming. And I loved how they slow rolled that and like kind of like showed how the Bale family that was so built around like this name of we are these knights and we actually are kind of like the aristocrats that are for the people and honorable and this and that, and how like one generation removed from that and how like it just got blown apart. So that sort of stuff. And then there's also like some really, really subtle things that, if you're not paying attention, you don't pick up on that I thought were great. Like, Rafa really, really talking about like the abuse that she suffered under her captor. I mean, it's sexual abuse, right? Like, and like the conversation she's having with her brother, like, what he did to me. And like, he's still like the brother is still siding with this evil person to try and like get their freedom. Like those like conflicts between those characters I thought were so great. And then then just the ending and how sad it is that, Olin records all this, right? And he ends up like basically being charged and murdered as like a heretic because he just wrote down and told the truth about Ramza, right? And they were like, "No, you're a crazy person. We're killing you. You're dead," right? And like it took, generations and generations for all this to finally come to light, and we're seeing the story through the eyes of like this, third party narrator. But like that was also just like a really sad thing where it's just like, man, like you have this scene where Olin is like, oh my gosh, Rams is still alive, and like sees him go away, right? And you're like, all right, happy ending. And then it fades out and it's like, and Olin was killed. And I'm like, no. Oh, it's so sad.
Yeah, and it's interesting picking on that thread. It's interesting that the history in Ivlis just keeps repeating itself because a central crux of the game was Ajora and the Zodiac Braves, and that whole history is written down in the Germanique Chronicles, which the church held, buried, kept locked away until Ramza busts into the vault and steals it. And then the same thing happened with Ramza's tale. So it's interesting that like they're just essentially caught in this time loop where they're just going to keep repeating the same cycle again and again and again. It's very sad. And John, to poke at your thoughts in a whole, it feels like it's the characters that make Final Fantasy Tactics for you.
It is. I mean, like I love the high fantasy betrayal, like Game of Thronesy story. But even Game of Thrones works because of the characters, right? So like all those characters and how they interact, that to me is like why that story is so fantastic.
Yeah. So do you think Tactics should have been Game of the Year over Expedition 33?
No.
It was the best sim strategy game at the Game Awards, so there's that.
Wrapping up my own thoughts on what stands out about the story of Final Fantasy Tactics, like it's that oppressive ending, and it's like that. I had always carried an impression that Tactics was a heavy game, even though I didn't remember the specifics of the story, the specifics of the ending. It's like I remember the impact that it had on me. Now playing through it, it's like, oh man, that still hits hard. Now, like 20 years after I originally and only saw the credits roll. The clear division of the family and that post-credit scene with Delita, like just great stuff. And for me, like there was a lot of challenge in getting through this game and getting to the end. Maybe I should have just played on normal difficulty. That would have solved a lot of problems. But it was so worth it for the ending. So three of us play this game with heavy nostalgia for the original. Bernsey, how well did the total package come together for you, not being tied to that nostalgia?
Yeah, I think it was quite a bit of fun. It is interesting hearing like you guys talk about some of the different fights and stuff like that. And I was sitting there, I was trying to think like when you brought up like the different examples, and it's like I think playing at the normal difficulty through a lot of those fights would have maybe made some of that a little bit more memorable, like some of the things that actually happened in the combat and stuff like that. So, it'd be nice at some point to kind of go through and experience more of that kind of from where I left off or whatever. But overall, I think it's still a really great game. I would probably recommend it to people. But you just need to know that if you haven't played the game before, you're getting into a game that's going to still have, it's going to still require a bit of grind to get the most out of it, I would say. And I think overall, like the game, like the story is a lot of fun. The combat's great. There's just still some archaic design to it, and I would really like to see them make like another game in this series. I don't think it should even be like an Ivalice or anything like that. Similar to how like the Tactics Advance games kind of just jumped to a completely, I think anyway, they jumped to it a completely different storyline, different worlds or whatever. It would be awesome to see them do another Tactics game, but like develop it now and sort of allow themselves to evolve systems. It would be amazing to have fights that it wasn't just, oh, your starting zone is here and you have 5 characters, or your starting zones are these 2 places and you have 2 here and 3 here. Having something else that they could do, or lots of different sort of permutations of that, or the ability to have some fights where, yeah, maybe it's just your two people. You have two people that you have to like blow through all of this stuff with, or you have fights where you have like you have to use 12 of your people. So hopefully you had more of your bench kind of built up, stuff like that. I feel like there's just a lot more that they could do with it. If they wanted to sort of evolve the systems. And that would be something that would be really cool to sort of embrace and experience, I think. So hopefully the game has done well enough for them that they think about doing something like that, because I would probably be there for it.
Yeah, give me more tactics. John, how were your nostalgia goggles?
The game to me is as good as it ever was. I think the grind is something to welcome, which is funny, right? I'm the guy on the podcast that's always like, I respect my time, right? Like, if you don't respect my time, I don't want to play you game. And like, it doesn't respect my time all that much because it's a game from the 90s, right? And like, it's a PS1 game. It just doesn't do it. But like, there's something comforting about like, nope, I'm gonna jump in and I'm gonna go play a couple missions and grind out some JP and make number go up, and that make guy hit harder and number go up, and great. And it's a weird system and fun and brings me back to like a happy place time in my life when I was a kid. So, you know, thumbs up all along. And like, again, it's a great story. Even if you just like, want to drop the difficulty down to easy, just to burn through it, just to play the story, so you don't have to do so much grinding. I think it's worth it to see how the characters play out in these beautiful dioramas, to take a look at an artifact of like RPG history. It's definitely something that's worth the $40. You could probably find it on sale for even cheaper now, to pick up and play through.
Mike, what about you?
Yeah, I have nostalgia for this game. I loved it when it first came out, but it holds. I played Triangle Strategy not too long ago. I don't know if you guys have played that game. It's a modern strategy game. Came out like 2 years ago. Final Fantasy Tactics is significantly a better game despite being 30 years old. I mean, just this game is so well constructed. The music is great. The graphics, I mean, these are improved graphics, but the sprite work was always great. This game had so much, unique and one-time use sprite work, which you didn't see in games like this very much because that was expensive. I mean, go back to Ogre Battle. That game had very few unique sprite animations. It had about 20 of them, and they reused them all across the board. This game, they had all sorts of bespoke, unique animations that gave the characters so much extra life and vitality in these cutscenes that make them work so much better than sprite cutscenes usually do. Just all the little things in this game were done well and still hold up to me. I mean, if you don't like tactics games, you're not going to like it because it is, at its heart, a very pure tactics game. But if you have any appreciation for tactics games, this is one to play.
And I had so much nostalgia with this game, and I'm so happy that I got to play it again, that I got to play it on PS5. I'm very thankful for that, but having just wrapped up the experience, I'm like, is Tactics still my favorite game? Like, man, I don't know, but like, if it isn't, like, what is it? Like, Cyberpunk? I don't know, D4? Like, I love D4. I played a lot of D4, but it's like, it's not. I didn't think that the game was as great as my memory made it out to be. Maybe it's
And
because
what specifically do you think?
I don't know. I think perhaps one of the reasons that I was so invested in the game the first time through is because it is hard, and it is like the hardest game that I beat for a very long time. And now that's not necessarily the case. Like, I don't keep a list of the toughest games I've beaten on my phone or anything, but it's like, I've accomplished things in games now, and like I like this experience, and I still love the art, and I love like the look of the characters, and I love that initial feel of getting into the job system and spreading out and getting the different jobs and making them work together. But it's like, man, I don't know if Tactics is my favorite anymore.
Sad day, folks. Tom is maturing and changing. Everyone, we can all see it happening before our eyes.
I don't want to mature or change. I'm awesome how I am. I'm wearing a Tactics shirt, yo. Lamb's on a chocobo.
I really do think it comes down to this was a game that was perfect for the age we were when it came out, because we had nothing but free time and could just sit there and play for hours on end and mess around with all the systems. And I feel like it's one of those things where if you don't have the time to put forward to it, I think they've added some things in that have helped to alleviate some of those stressors. But there's still some of that stuff where you kind of you get stuck on a specific battle for a couple of sessions, and then you're just like, is this really worth it? When does that frustration become more than the fun that you're getting out of the game? And so I think that's one of those things where that is part of it that complicates it when you're older and you have less free time and you have more responsibilities outside of that. It makes it that I think adds some of that into there. So
I do think you playing it on the hardest difficulty level
probably
ruined it a little bit for you.
Yeah.
Right? I think if you would have played it on just normal and left it go, you would have just had a good time, and you wouldn't have run into so many of those things where you're like, I'm done. I'm going to be done, or I got to leave this and go grind. And like, that's a fault of this game. Like, this game is notorious for its difficulty spikes and its RNG messing you over, right? And like, you basically said, you know what I want? I want more of that, right? I'm going to make that part more easy to happen and more difficulty, causing you to have to grind more. So like, it's interesting where you're like, no, I want to have a challenge, and like, this game it's a challenge on its own because it's kind of unfair.
Yeah, and like maybe that was the heart of my issue with it, because like there were times when I wasn't losing because I was being outfoxed, outflanked, outjobbed, outmaneuvered, outthought. I was just like, oh, one hit just killed two dudes like before I could act. That sucks. That doesn't feel very tactical. And I don't want to give myself too much credit. Are there 3 difficulties or 4 on this game?
3.
3. Maybe I did play on normal. Like, I should have verified before recording. I don't want to give myself too credit saying that I did beat it on hard if I didn't. So maybe I'm just not very good at the game, and I'm getting dumber as I get older. Also possible. Tactics is still a great game. I don't know if I'd use Masterpiece, but it's an awesome game. It's a great piece of RPG history, and we can play it on modern consoles. So, like, anything else you guys want to say about Tactics before I wrap it up here?
One thing, if you do pick up the game, they added in one other thing they added in was these weird like novels. Like, as you're exploring, you find books. So there is also like, if you like video game history, it's these weird like almost choose your own adventure-y novel things where like you like go north and like you find the blue orb, and then you can like go around and like you have a set amount of fuel, and every time you go somewhere, it's burning your fuel. Like, they were really, really interesting, and I remember these things from when I was a kid playing the original, and like, it taking forever because every time you went to a new screen, like the disc is running on your PlayStation and it's loading and this and that. But it was kind of I think a cool thing to restore that and bring those and make sure they were there, because they brought those back for this. So just one more thing, like, look in that compendium if you're playing, and look at those books. You can read them and play those weird novel games they have in there.
I hated those with a burning fiery passion. I don't remember them from the original playthrough.
Yeah. You don't get anything either, which I find hilarious. Like, I played through one and I beat it and I was like, yay, what do I get? Nothing. So I'm like, I'm not playing any more of these. It took much time, but like, just glad it made it into the game.
Yeah, I'm gladish. Any other closing thoughts on Final Fantasy Tactics from the crew?
I don't know. I thought those were hilarious. I enjoyed them. Who wouldn't want to play as an adolescent teenage girl who's trying to who wants to fall in love with the gardener's son, right? I mean, come on. That's exactly what you want out of your Final Fantasy Tactics time.
Yeah, that's the power of fantasy. And with that wraps up our discussion on Final Fantasy Tactics, the Ivalice Chronicles by Square Enix. Next month, we're going to break down Helldivers 2 by Arrowhead Studios. On the main feed, we just dropped our annual video game movie review, which covers movies from 2019 to 2015 to 2019. And then in January, we're going to switch gears to board games and break down one of our favorite mechanics with deck builders. We hope you'll jump in and play alongside us. Please support Outside is Overrated at patreon.com/OiO. And until next month, stay inside, kids.